Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and to all of our online participants, it is a great honor to welcome you to the Global Smart City Leadership Forum 2021 at World Smart City Expo. My name is Min Soo-jung from Seoul National University Global R&D Center. It is an honor and delight to be serving as your MC. On behalf of Global R&D Center and BK21 HLD program of Smart City Global Convergence at Seoul National University and the Strategic Infrastructure Performance Institute, I'd like to extend our sincere gratitude to the esteemed speakers and audiences for joining us today. GSCL 2021 is conducted in a hybrid format for both in-person participants here in Kintex, Republic of Korea, and virtual participants in Zoom and World Smart City Expo websites. Once again, I appreciate you taking precious time for joining us. To commence the opening ceremony, we'll have Professor Jun-seok Hwang, Director of BK21 HLD Program of Smart City Global Convergence at Seoul National University. He will deliver opening remarks as a host of this forum. Please give a warm welcome to the Professor Jun-seok Hwang.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon in Korea and very good early morning, DC in the United States of America. I'm Professor Jun-seok Hwang and Director of Global R&D Center of Seoul National University. It is my great honor to co-organize this first Global Smart City Leadership Forum at World Smart City Expo 2021 with our great partner institution, the Strategic Infrastructure Performance Institute in the United States of America. I'd like to express my deepest thanks to all the participating leaders of global smart cities. Especially this year's theme is the great transformation through Global Smart City Leadership 2030 based on U.S. Korea Strategic Smart City Infrastructure Partnership. Globally, while cities have been the center of human civilization and social advancement, globally, again, the cities are experiencing critical challenges such as environmental degradation, climate change, fiscal incapability, insufficient housing still, and overcrowding, unemployment, and wrecked transportation, and again, still ongoing inequality. In this regard, GSCL, Global Smart City Leadership 2021 Forum, provides the global platform for the integrated cooperation between global leadership for new forms of smart cities on the basis of green, digital, and sustainable transformation. With the purpose of Global Smart City 2030 achievement along with UN SDG and urban problem resilience, this forum is structured to facilitate inspiration discussion and promote deep knowledge sharing on smart cities, as well as establish global cooperative partnership based on diverse perspectives from a variety of sectors, including academia, private and public sector, and policymakers and practitioners around the world. Finally, I want to welcome all of you to the first Global Smart City Forum with my great forum leaders, especially Professor Cha-Guk Kwon from Seoul National University, Professor Martin Wise from University of Pittsburgh, and Mr. Norman Anderson from the Strategic Infrastructure Performance Institute of United States of America. Thank you. I hope you enjoy the forum and have a successful event today. Thank you.
Please give a big round of applause, Professor Jun-seok Hwang. Thank you very much for your wonderful remarks. Now, for welcoming remarks, I'd like to invite Professor Kuk-Kon Cha. He is a professor in the College of Engineering at Seoul National University. He also serves as Vice President of the National Academy of Engineering of Korea. Professor Kuk-Kon Cha will give a virtual welcoming remarks. Please join me in welcoming Professor Kuk-Kon Cha.
My distinguished speakers, dear friends and colleagues, good afternoon for the folks in Korea, and good morning or good evening for international participants in different time zones. My name is Kuk-Kon Cha. I served as the Dean of the College of Engineering of Seoul National University by the end of August. Now I just stepped down and then returned to the full professor in chemical engineering. So we are still facing a time of extraordinary challenges due to COVID-19, and the world continues to confront the coronavirus pandemic. In this situation, I'm utterly excited to welcome you all to the Global Smart City Leadership Forum 2021 as a part of the World Smart City Expo Korea 2021. And it is my great honor to celebrate this important event together with you all. Particularly, I'd like to thank Mr. Norman Anderson, Chairman and CEO, the CGLA Infrastructure Incorporation, and the Strategic Infrastructure Performance Institute, and also other colleagues. We met in Seoul in May, I think, on site, but this time we are kind of far apart. But for their visionary leadership for this event and continuing contribution to fostering mutual collaborative smart city partnership between USA and Korea. As the global community makes an important transition from the old paradigm of urban environment to a future one, it is truly important that we set the right direction and right steps to reach the urban environment that is resilient, sustainable, inclusive, and progressive. Accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic and urgency of actions to respond to climate and the environmental crisis, we are at the crossroad of a critical transition. The decision we are making today will affect decades of our future or even much longer. Smart city development is a global effort to make a right transition toward the right future of a human habitat. Yet we have many obstacles and issues in realizing the vision and desirable benefit of smart cities. More importantly than anything else, we should reconfirm our basic understanding about the conditions of making smart city develop meaningful with the question that what does the smart city initiative be truly meaningful? For smart city development effort to be successful, I would like to suggest 4 dimensions of thinking for the successful realization of smart city vision. They are 4 I's: inspiration, innovation, integration, and implementation. First, smart city should provide inspiration to its citizens. It should be able to nourish creative imagination for people to dream their lives that are full of vision, creativity, aspiration, and hope for the vivacity of their lives and dynamic pursuit of life goals. In this sense, it is truly important that all smart city initiatives should be people-centered. The fundamental purpose of developing smart cities is to make all urban environment contribute to enabling people to live a safe, healthy, sustainable, divergent, culturally diverse, and environmentally rich life. The starting line of the smart city should be people value, and the end line should also people value altogether. Second, smart city should bring and actualize innovation deep into citizens' lives. It should change and enhance the whole systems of urban life with significant improvement, even to the level of dramatic transformation wherever it is needed. Deploying advanced digital technologies, new health, safety solutions, new mobility systems, green industrial ecosystems, sustainable environmental infrastructures, and global connectivity, smart city should be a big open space where new culture and business can be prompted and encouraged. Third, smart city should be holistic integration. The whole architecture and environment of a smart city should be designed with the strategy of a full integration of urban planning, urban design, urban infrastructure, energy, environment, industrial ecosystem, health, culture, education, and city life. All the elements of these areas should be brought into the smart city planner's design table, and all voices from all these sectors should be heard so that the whole component of desirable future city can be holistically integrated. This will ensure better sustainability of smart cities for longer term while no one is ignored. Lastly, smart cities should be implemented right from the start. Strategies and the design of smart cities should be right and appropriate to the city's economic, technological, and the social capacity. We should not build smart cities that turn out to be a monstrous stranger to the citizens who cannot be properly operated due to the excessive cost of maintenance. Technologies to be deployed should be friendly while progressive. Infrastructure should be for everyone, yet economical, and communities and citizens should feel they are fully engaged. I would like to celebrate all the speakers of today in a hope that they will all bring brilliant ideas and rich practical experiences and knowledge on all these so that the whole global community of smart cities can benefit from their vision and wisdom. As well, I would like to hope that this forum shall bring exciting ideas of international collaboration, particularly among Korea, USA, and all nations who wish to advance to the next paradigm of urban habitats through the smart city development. This forum shall be a new start of inspiration, innovation, and integration toward successful implementation of our shared dream of better world. And I wish everyone participating today can find a vision for action through discussions we are going to have. My sincere and the big congratulations to you all, and I wish you a healthy and joyous day. Thank you very much.
Please give a big round of applause, Professor Kukonta. Thank you very much for your inspirational remarks. Now, for keynote speech, it is with great pleasure that I welcome Professor Martin Weiss. He is a professor of University of Pittsburgh and Associate Director of Center for Governance and Market. He will be a virtual keynote speech. Please give a warm welcome to Professor Martin Weiss.
Thank you, Professor Huang and Professor Char. I'm honored to have this opportunity to address this distinguished group. As an academic, I know that your intimate knowledge about the details of smart city deployment exceed mine. I hope that the more theoretical and broader approach that I can offer stimulates your thinking and enables you to improve what you are doing on the ground. Professor Huang asked me to speak to the topic of leadership in smart cities. As you know, perhaps better than I do, this is a topic that has many dimensions. For my remarks today, I will focus on one of these. How do you decide about which investments to make? I'd like to begin by briefly situating the context as I see it, because it has implications for the kinds of investments we must make. While this is probably not surprising to you, I think it is important to my argument. The main thrust of my comments have to do with the idea of optionality and what that means for smart city leadership. In setting the stage, I would like to begin with the observation that cities are not monolithic entities. They are collections of neighborhoods and districts, each of which can have unique features and attributes. These features may consist of unique infrastructure, geographic characteristics, and cultural characteristics, among others. In many American cities, for example, individual neighborhoods were identified with their immigrant groups. In Pittsburgh, we have a neighborhood called Polish Hill, which was settled at one time by people from Poland. We have the Bloomfield district, which was settled by people from Italy. Deutschtown was settled by people from Germany. And there are other districts as well that were home to different European immigrant groups. Over time, this has gotten more complex, where we have different language groups. We may have Chinese speakers. We may have Spanish speakers that are concentrated in different areas. And this is, again, it's a moving target in American cities. So these boundaries aren't fixed. And in fact, there are many overlaps between these different regions. This kind of brings us to the idea of polycentrism. Polycentrism just means that we have multiple centers of responsibility that may overlap. This recognizes different governance regimes that we may have. In American cities, we may have a city government, we may have a county government, we have a state government. We also have different regimes over the top of that, maybe neighborhood communities that get together to define things. This appears to be chaotic and disorganized, but thanks to the pioneering work of Vincent and Eleanor Ostrom, in the 1950s and the 1960s, we were able to see that even though it looks chaotic, it's often a more effective way of delivering citizen services than a more organized, centralized approach. So we shouldn't reject polycentrism just on the basis of being chaotic. The development may be path dependent. There's not a straight line that gets there, and every path will result in a different outcome. The next thing I want to say is that smart means different things to different groups of people. Governance groups and city officials may be interested in, for example, information collection and data processing to support efficient operations of a city. An individual citizen, by contrast, may be more interested in getting their street cleaned or ensuring that parking is available. People in other areas may have a greater interest in public safety than in some of these kinds of things. So when we talk about the word smart, we may well ask the question, smart for whom and for whom the intelligence exists? I don't want to wade into the debate of exactly what we mean by a smart city. We are all here, I think, because we have at least some kind of an understanding of what a smart city is. For the purpose of this talk, let's just say that a smart city is a dynamic information overlay on a city that consists of sensors and significant information processing engines. The purpose of all of this is to support decision-making for individual citizens in the city, as well as for the operations of a city. So given that we have to build sensors of some kind and an information processing infrastructure, it's appropriate to consider smart city as an infrastructure, at least in part of as an infrastructure. What this means is that investments must be made in advance of services being delivered, which means that it's difficult. We have a lag between the investment and how the investment is used. The second thing that's often true about infrastructures is that they're an intermediate product for many other different goods and services. So we consider, for instance, roads. Roads is a well-known piece of an infrastructure. Well, roads by themselves are not particularly interesting. What they're interesting, though, is that they provide us with a means to other ends. It's a means for us to get to work. It's a means for us to visit friends. It's a means for us to deliver goods and services. And so it's an intermediate product rather than an end product. So because of this, infrastructures are often invisible. Invisible not in the sense that you can't see them, but invisible in the sense that we overlook them and we don't think about them until they break. We assume that they exist. And so because of this invisible nature of infrastructures, there's often a problem in making sure that we get sufficient investments for them. So what does this mean for you? Well, first of all, concrete investments have to be made before the use cases are fully understood, especially with a new technology like smart cities. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The other interesting thing about this, like a lot of new technologies, the use cases that we have co-evolve with the capabilities and characteristics of the infrastructure themselves. That means that users don't exactly know what they want until they see it. And as a system developer and a system provider, you can't really fully form the investment in the infrastructure until you understand what users want. And so once you understand what they want, you make changes in the infrastructure. When the infrastructure changes, what people want can change as well. All of this suggests, together with the diversity that we see in a modern city, that a single approach may not be aligned well with the diversity of a city. So we're kind of setting up this idea that maybe a central planning approach may not be 100% what we want to do. So we can learn from other systems. So for instance, if we take computer networking, in the 1980s and 1990s, there was a large effort in the computer industry that was led by the leading computer companies of the day to develop a series of standards that are referred to Open Systems Interconnection, or OSI reference models. These standards were intended to address the market concerns of the day. And notably, they were thought to be so-called anticipatory standards. They were standards that were developed in advance of the actual technology being deployed. And there are reasons for doing that, and that would be a conversation for another time. At the same time, really literally at the same time in a different technological environment, the US Department of Defense had started investing in computer networking technology as well. What they needed was a completely, they needed a robust environment. They needed a communication protocol that would succeed, that was highly survivable. So that would succeed under diverse operating circumstances. And unlike OSI, which was based on anticipatory standards, TCP systems were based on what they call rough consensus and running code. That means it was very implementation oriented. So we had in TCP/IP a system that was very much oriented towards developing standardized working systems, but with a high bias towards decentralization. So the Common Core investment was minimal, and it wasn't broad. Well, if you look at your computer today, you see that it's not running the OSI reference model. Instead, it's running TCP/IP. And so TCP/IP was clearly the successful outcome in this. And one of the main reasons why it was successful, there were a couple of reasons actually. One of them was that it was operations oriented. In other words, in the late 1980s, when the microcomputer revolution was really starting to take over and people wanted to network systems, they could get TCP/IP systems. The code was available. I mean, there were some problems with it, but they could be ironed out. It was all open source. The second thing about TCP/IP was that services were built around the edges of the services. So just as a way of example, we went through a couple of different iterations of information sharing services before the World Wide Web finally settled in as the way to go. Some of you who remember might remember WAIS, W-A-I-S, there was Gopher, there were anonymous FTP services. I mean, there were a bunch of different things that were tried. The web was by far the most seamless one. We also went through several different varieties of social networks. There were computerized bulletin boards. There were these proprietary so-called walled garden systems like AOL, and so on. So we went through a couple of iterations until Facebook and Twitter finally emerged. So the focus on interconnection rather than kind of enabled local organizations to make investments that were optimized for the local community without sacrificing connectivity to other communities. So again, we could spend a lot more time talking about this, but I don't have that kind of time in this talk. So let me move on to talk about local area networks. Local area networks were developed in the late 1970s. The standardization community began by looking at the Ethernet standard that was brought forward by Xerox and Digital Equipment Corporation and Intel. Ethernet, as many of you may know, has particular characteristics that may not meet all applications. And so there was a deadlock in the local area network communities because nobody could agree on how the system should perform. So the committee resolved this by essentially forking the standard into different approaches. And some of you may remember back in the 1980s and the 1990s, we could buy local area networks based on Ethernet, on token ring, on token bus. There were a variety of things that emerged. In fact, the wireless Ethernet that we are all using today didn't occur until much later. But the architecture, this decentralized type of, or this architecture that was developed for the local area network standards allowed this to emerge and allow this to thrive. Why did this occur? And again, you know, without kind of ruining the punchline here, we have given up using token ring and token bus some time ago, except for very specialized applications. And Ethernet, it was really the one that was successful. Does that mean that Ethernet was the best? I'm not comfortable saying that. What I will say, though, is that Ethernet was generally good enough for most applications. And most importantly, Ethernet was the first standard to get custom integrated circuits for it. And so the cost dropped radically. So it was inexpensive and good enough. And so it ended up dominating. Finally, another example that we can learn from, if we look back into the last 20 years or so, maybe a little more, 30 years, as computers began to become important, we had ambitious projects for building complex IT systems. The U.S. government had some. We saw commercial companies have very ambitious projects to integrate these things. And there were some colossal failures. There were failures in the sense that systems became much more costly to build and took longer. And when they were delivered, they failed to meet end user needs. And so what happened was, as a result of that, and the analysis of that, was that it kind of focused on this coevolution problem that we've already talked about. We needed to have users adjusted their expectations as the system was being developed. And so we began to see new approaches to system development, like rapid prototyping and Scrum and Agile and other kinds of things that allowed these systems to evolve in a very different way to avoid these costly failures. So what can we learn from all of this? Well, one thing is that modularity allows for dynamic flexibility of investment and use. So we can, by modularizing systems, we can relatively easily customize them. Adaptability is really important to meet user needs. Systems fail if they're not adaptable. And then the ongoing evaluation of system suitability is important because it guides future development and it guides future investment. So from a more technical way, a lot of these things point to this idea of optionality. So with new technologies and new systems, user expectations and systems can evolve simultaneously. As I said, users don't really know what they want until they see it. And once they see it, they imagine what else can be done. And so people want choices. They want to be able to evolve. And you as a system developer want to give people those kinds of choices. We see this in these information system development approaches that I talked about just a moment ago. The main thing here is that these approaches allow dynamic adaptation of user expectations and technologies. So the idea of optionality is rooted in financial options. Financial options give us the right to buy or sell an asset at some time in the future at a specified price. Notice that this is a right. It's not an obligation. It's not a contract. It turns out that options can be very useful for risk management. If you're interested in exploring this further, Nicholas Nassim Taleb wrote a book on this called Anti-Fragile, where it's a more complicated read than just that, but he gets into the way in which options can work. So financial options are fine, but this needed to be translated into something that was useful for investments. And so this idea of real options came along. And so a real option is an option where the underlying asset is not financial, but it's actual. For example, oil in the ground, or perhaps real estate. With real options, these kinds of rights, instead of buying or selling an asset, were reframed so they'd be more useful for investment purposes. So we could have an option to delay an investment, for instance, or the option to expand and the option to contract. With real options, we can value those. And so we end up with a decision-making framework that allows us to explicitly engage with uncertainty that's built into the system. So getting back to smart cities, actually getting back to networks, there was a paper, I guess now 20 years ago, which I had the occasion to revisit. This is a paper written by Mark Gaynor, Scott Bradner, and others. In fact, Gaynor and Bradner have written in this time frame, wrote a number of papers that dealt with the thought option services. So in this particular paper that I have referred to on this page, they included this figure. And I thought this one was useful for thinking about smart city infrastructure. So when markets, if we look on the left side of this figure, when market uncertainty is great, we should invest in relatively small fixed core infrastructures and allow a lot of flexibility on what gets done with those. As market uncertainty decreases, as it happens with learning, as we try different kinds of services utilizing this core infrastructure, for instance, the uncertainty decreases. We understand what users want to be able to do, what different classes of users want to do. And when we do that, we can bring more into the stable core. So in the networking world, again, it's an area that I know perhaps better. When we started out with the internet, we didn't know exactly what we wanted to do with it. So David Clark famously said that we were building a network, but we didn't know what we were building it for. And what he meant by that, I mean, it's actually a funny statement in English, but what he meant by that was that there was no application, no particular application in mind for that. As in contrast with the telephone network, in the telephone network, it was a network that was built for delivering calls. We used the telephone network for lots of things. We used it to send images on fax machines. We used it eventually to with data modems to connect computers together. But in each one of those cases, we had to make the telephone network think that it was connecting a voice call, because that's what it did. The transition to the internet moved us away from that. So we didn't know, for instance, that we wanted email. We didn't know that we wanted to be able to transmit video. We didn't know we wanted to share information and so on. And so we had to build We had to try a lot of different kinds of services. As for instance, the services, as we got a better idea of what we wanted to do, let's say streaming video, more of these things got pulled into the core. So for instance, nowadays we have content delivery networks that pull, that move data closer to the end user so that the performance is better and so the load on the network is worse. And that's essentially become a core service to the internet. So what does this mean for you? It means that you should be planning your investments for adaptability. What you focus on as being core should depend on how stable, how clearly you understand the need for that information. And the dimensions of this adaptability is multidimensional. We can have temporal adaptability, that is, we change over time. We may want spatial adaptability, so we change over space. And so, in other words, one neighborhood may not need exactly the same services as another neighborhood based, for instance, on topography. Or we have cultural adaptability. Different communities within a city may have different needs. So we may have needs for smart city services in different languages, for instance. Framing your investment decisions through optionality may be helpful because it allows you to explicitly value flexibility. And so you may be able to make better long-term investments. And finally, and this is not something I've talked about a lot, was building a path for sustainable investments. So there's a lot of enthusiasm initially for making investments, but if those aren't sustained over time, then the infrastructure will collapse. And so you can do this by connecting into the intermediate product aspect of the smart city investments with the social goals that a city or a country may have. It's also important to address equity within a city because equity, one of the criticisms for a lot of the new smart city deployments is that they tend to be biased towards wealthy communities. So what do I want to leave you with? First, remember cities are not monolithic. I know that you know that about your city, but because they're monolithic, should smart city systems be monolithic or not? I mean, I tend to think no. I tend to have a bias towards liking these polycentric and adaptable approaches. The uses of smart city technologies co-evolve with the technology investments themselves. And so the idea of optionality allows you to incorporate that explicitly into your investment strategy. And I think that this is a useful framework for modeling smart city investments. So just a brief statement about the Center for Governance and Markets. This is a new center at the University of Pittsburgh where we want to analyze topics like these. We analyze them from a bottom-up perspective. We do this through a network of global partners. And in smart cities is one of the topics that we are concentrating on, and in particular, we want to understand how rules that affect the ability of communities to engage in collective action. So if you're interested in what the Center for Governance and Markets does, please click this website. So I want to thank you for your attention. I would much rather have been there in person to discuss these matters with you in greater detail, but that was not possible. I would like to give you the opportunity to engage with me, though. If you have any questions or would like to discuss this further with me, please reach out to me at this email address. Thank you again, and I wish you a productive and engaging meeting.
please give a big round of applause to Professor Martin Weiss. I appreciate your speech giving us in-depth insights. Now, we'll move on to the first session for GSCL 2021. It is titled Global Smart City Key Leadership Interview. There are 5 rounds of 10-minute interview in this session. We are pleased to have Mr. Norman Anderson as an interviewer. He is a chairman and CEO of CGLA Infrastructure and the Strategic Infrastructure Performance Institute, located in Washington, D.C. in the United States. And it is with great pleasure that I invite 2 interviewees onto the stage. Professor Young-Sub Chu and Dr. Jong-Sung Hwang, please come up on stage and take your seats. Dr. Jong-Sung Hwang is a lead researcher of National Information Society Agency. And distinguished Professor Young-Sub Chu serves as a faculty of a BK21 HRD program of Smart City Global Convergence at Seoul National University. And Michael Woods, CEO and COO of Big Sun Holdings Group, Ms. Jennifer Schmitz, CEO of Lattice Industries, and Professor Young-Sang Kwon is in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Seoul National University, participate in this session virtually. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Norman Anderson and all of his interviewees. Mr. Norman Anderson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be with you all. As Professor Weiss said, we would prefer to be with you all in person, but it's really great to see everybody and to see people, as Professor Char said, who we were together with in person in May, and now to see you virtually. We're going to do a quick round of questions. I think we have a phenomenally interesting panel, and so I'd like to make sure that they have a chance to really express some of the key ideas in smart cities, and especially, I think, keying off what Professor Weiss said on the leadership side. So let me start with a question to every one of the panelists, and if you all could answer briefly, but with a high degree of insight, that would be fantastic. This is by way of introducing yourselves. The question is, each one of you is a leader in terms of smart cities, smart city infrastructure. And when I look at smart cities, I break it down into a couple of areas where you need to exercise leadership. I think one is technology. Another one is the business model, right? It's not really going to work unless there's a business model, even if it's a public sector entity or organization. It needs a business model that's sustainable. And the third one is, as Professor Weiss said at the end, some sort of a governance model, rules. How do we guide the process? So, where do you exercise leadership? And if I could, as a way to introduce people, why don't we give everybody 3 minutes to answer that question? On my agenda, Michael, you appear first, so I'm going to go to you first, if that's okay. Unmute, Michael.
Trying to be safe and just muted too much. Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Norman, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the wonderful invitation. A little bit early in the United States, but that's okay. That's how it happens with international business. I agree with you on leadership being in those 3 areas of technology, the business model, governance, and the rules base. There's other parts of leadership that we also should consider here for smart cities. It's really all about the people, as any business is. Right? And a smart city infrastructure is a business. Right? It's not just about the digitization it's about the business of the operations of the smart city ecosystem. So it's really about both the public and the private interaction and the leadership that makes that interaction happen between local government officials, between all the business vendors, which there are many of them, to make a smart city ecosystem work, and of course about the public's involvement, belief, and as Professor Char said earlier, the inspiration of those citizens to make sure that they buy into what the smart city benefits are for them over time. So some of the things that we want to make sure on a leadership basis that happens for any kind of smart city introduction, implementation, and execution, it's also all about the education. Why is this important? Why does this mean something to me as a citizen, to me as a business, to me as a leader? Why does that have to be something that's in my city? Why do I need it? Right? And that education can't be one time. It has to be constant for them at all different levels of the rollout, of the beginning of the different systems. Why are there so many cameras around my city? As a perfect example, is my individual information being used in some way that I don't approve of? Most especially here in the United States, that's one of the biggest issues is data privacy. How is that being used and how private is my data when you're gathering so much around my environment that you want to use in some kind of way, and how are you using it? So really it's the education of that and the coordination with those city planners and the private sector vendors and the public users and providers of that data. And then lastly, Norm, I'd say it's the consistency of that leadership. One thing that we see too often in the public side and also the private side is when you go down a long 3 to 5 year business plan of rolling out a smart city ecosystem, all those public officials, the city planners, the government officials that are elected or not elected, et cetera, you're coming in and out of different regimes. That's extremely challenging. So usually it would be much better to have consistency of those leadership teams, public and private, to make sure that you have resiliency of your plan, you have sustainability of your plan, and of course leadership when it's extended usually is much more impactful than leadership that's changed halfway through a plan.
That's great, Michael. And amazingly, you took exactly 3 minutes too, which is very impressive. The next speaker I'd like to go to is Jiangsung Huang, who's the lead researcher at the National Information Society Agency. Could you answer the same or address the same issue in terms of where you exercise leadership?
I think so. The leadership is the area leadership is important. I think visioning. So visioning and developing strategy. So I think there are two types of smart cities. So in extreme, so how to say, ideal types. So one is improving the current city. The other is to creating new city. So many smart cities so far focus on solving the urban problems, very difficult urban problems. So that is good thing. But a smart city should go further. So we can think about a city into perspective, passive and active. So if we think a city is just a space people live in, then it is a passive city. But we can also think about active city. So active city means that a city help citizens to do more things or to do their business. So far, city has been passive. So our main objective is to eliminate the problem from city and make citizens live without a big problem. But smart city open new ways. So to realize the active city. So active city means that city not only provide a space, a city, but also provide tools for citizens to use in their everyday life and everyday business. So for instance, the smart city can provide devices as common goods, provide data for common goods. So at the moment, many company and many citizens have to buy their own device, have to subscribe to broadband internet service, and have to buy data for themselves. But the smart city can provide many resources as common goods, just like providing roads, streets, providing the street light, providing security. So there's a possibility to make use of smart city for the bigger and for a longer purpose. So I think leadership is very critical to making this kind of possibility a reality. Okay, thank you.
That's really great. Thank you so much. Both of the first answers I thought were phenomenal because they really make you think about some of the key issues. So it's becoming increasingly challenging. Let me go to my friend Jen Schmitz, who is the CEO of Lattice Industries. Jen, talk about how you think about leadership in terms of smart cities.
So in our model, and what we focus on is really the regional exchange of this large quantity of data and how that actually affects down to the citizen, through to the business, and then through to the government. And what we think, in terms of everything I've seen in a smart city and what some cities try to be as a smart city, the two main literal devices that actually make people successful are collaboration and facilitation. And so if you're going to have a smart city, you have to be able to take all the stakeholders and help them collaborate to see the value of the proposition of the data that's going to be exchanged. They also have to acknowledge the risks of the data that's going to have to be exchanged. So the collaboration as a leader and understanding those and how to bring people to the table that may most times have conflicting views, but everyone knows that the benefit of using metadata and other data in an enriched version can help all these cities solve their problems, but they actually have to get to the table first to discuss those problems. And that's where you have to have leadership on these regional and local levels that have opened their eyes to the education, as you know, some of the other panelists have mentioned, and also to really opening to that to a transparency and enabling that collaboration to build a trust that a marketplace that facilitates the masses is actually going to enrich everyone, bringing that value back to the citizens, bringing the value back to the government, as well as enriching the businesses as they can go and access data sources they've never received before. So it's really about the collaboration in our eyes.
That's really great. And, you know, the data exchange that you're talking about, creating a real marketplace for smart city data is, I think, unique. The next speaker is Young Sup Ju, the Distinguished Professor of Smart Cities at Seoul National University. And I'd really like to ask the same question of you. It's a real good way for the audience to get to know you, especially the international audience. So where do you exercise leadership in terms of your smart city work and practice?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anderson. Actually, very nice to see you again. Very late night in your city, all right? The past midnight.
It is. Thank you so much.
Yeah, past midnight. Okay. Okay, so
Yes.
I completely agree with you in that leadership is going to be a most important part of the success, for the success of the smart cities. Actually, I think that leadership needs to be started from the creating the shared vision of for certain smart cities. Actually, in order to create the vision, of course, we need to understand what kind of needs, what kind of wants the people have, or we need to actually educate people with some new way of life, new way of the enabling technologies. So actually follow the people or lead people. Actually, the leadership must play a role of the doing both ways. So actually, in order to do so, As you mentioned, the key parts, including technology, business model, and governance, as you mentioned, could be a very important issue. Actually, in order to exercise the leadership. So, but these three elements must be integrated in some sense. Rather than individual approach, we need a very holistic approach by embodying, integrating these three elements. So basically, I have maintained a very the converging style of life, starting with the industry for 30 years, including the 10 years as a CEO, and serving for the country as a government official for twice, for 5 years, and now they are 6 years with the academia. So I think that by making the most of my career, I'd like to accomplish kind of the real understanding or real collaboration among the leaders, especially in the area of the government, the industry, and university, academia, in other words, and the research institutes. So those the leaders needs to be cooperating each other. So I'll do my best to create leadership consensus to eventually, in order to create consensus among people for our future smart cities. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, especially since you've worked in all of the different areas. I think that's really important to have that perspective. It's almost to have that empathy. And the last presenter in the first round, my last victim, is Young Sung Kwan, the professor at Seoul National University. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. It's nice to meet you, all of you. I don't know who you are, and I don't know where you are. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Not good night, not yet.
Not yet.
I'm professor of urban design in Seoul National University and director of a smart city education program funded by the Korean government. And it's very impressive today's well organized conference, I think that. And clearly, I think the emergence of the smart cities is new opportunities in terms of the digital transformation and the development of the data-based infrastructure. This is the main issues for this conference. And Korea is also pushing the smart city as a national policy very vigorously and is trying to form a global leadership, I think. And also many infrastructures are being reconfigured to fit smart cities. In the past, I think that the construction companies did the construction in Korea, but now the telecommunications or IT companies are transforming into the construction companies now. Related to that, this topic of this session, the global key leadership, I will comment about the Korean experience and the urban planning expert. The first one is about the Korean leadership, I think. As a country, you know that as a country with a lot of experience in urban development in short period of time, Korea successfully created many cities in about only 50 years after the Korean War. It developed industrial cities that created Samsung Electronics and Hyundai Motors, successfully created metropolitan areas. I don't know that you know the cities of the Dundang, Ilsan is a well-known of the Korean new towns near that Seoul to ease the concentration in metropolitan area. Also, the smart cities like Songdo is well known as a smart cities of Korea were also developed. And you know that the Sejong city, the second capital of Korea, was also developed to prevent the concentration of the Seoul metropolitan area. Because of this experience of that many the city built, Korea is actively participating in urban development project in the neighborhood developing countries, and is demonstrating is a global leadership, I think. I also actually participate in several international urban development projects. I'm sorry, today I'm another place right now because I'm going to attend another planning meeting for the Indonesian, the new capital city master plan today.
Wow.
For a while. And what I felt while this kind of conducting several international urban development projects was that our technology could not directly apply to other countries. In some countries, it rains a lot. For some countries, there is no internet services. And in some countries, we focus on that the public transportation about the private mobilities, but these countries, there's even no the public transportation service were not available in there. So I think that there is a big gap of that smart city development situation. So I think that the first important point of the global leadership is to take into account the circumstance of the other countries. We need to get away from the idea that the image of the smart city is single. The vision may be different. I think that 100 cities can have 100 smart city technologies and visions in there, I think. So the second is that nonetheless, we face the similar problem in all the countries and the cities. It is a matter of climate change and carbon emissions. It's the same with the global food problem. It is the same that. And this area, there's a problem of sharing the rules of development and underdeveloped countries, I think. In this part, the political interest between the countries of the developed countries and underdeveloped countries should co-work together and co-work and the global network and talk together very much. On the global issues, the richer countries should take a lead and pay more to improve their cities to support that other underdeveloped countries. But it is very difficult to solve this problem. It is related to the international policies and politics there. But we should concentrate that the global leaders giving that some insight. Even the rest, we should invest and co-work together to get to overcome this gap of each nations and cities, I think. So I think that for this reason, the global leadership is important to lessening the gap of each cities for next generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's really an interesting panel with, I think, a lot of phenomenal insights. You guys have already gotten me thinking a lot of different ways, and you come at it from a number of different perspectives. Michael, I'm going to go back to you because one of the issues you mentioned is thinking about customers. And that's one of the questions I have. A lot of times, especially in the U.S., when you think about a smart city, you're thinking about technology, you're thinking about, what one of the panelists mentioned, solving, I think, eliminating all the problems that we already have. But how do you think about the customers? How do you put customers into this conversation so that we can be smart about who the customers are, and the customers can have an ability? I guess one of the panelists talked about making the customers active, giving them tools to be able to do things in cities that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. Can you just talk about how you think about customers?
Sure. That's a very good question. And there's quite a few different levels of customers inside a smart city ecosystem, right? It's not just the person that's utilizing the data and servicing the data. They're both a customer and they're a vendor of the data, right? On both sides. The customer is also all of us, right? We're customers in some way when we're providing our services, but we're also utilizing services in the city and providing data into that side of the transaction, which Jennifer talked about earlier about the importance of that data and the security of the data. So really to us, the customer side, it varies, right? In terms of the level of the customer, the needs of the customer, and of course the wants of the customer, which of course is the biggest place to focus on. Right? The only reason the customer is going to use something is because they want to use something, not because they need to. The need may not be understood, but the desire and the want is understood very well by the customer, and that's what we all focus upon all the time. So in a global smart city as well, that customer, let's start first with the citizenship, the engagement and the participation of the citizens. There, it's not so much about gathering personal data, but it's more so about building upon some kind of open source technology which enables those citizens or those customers, those clients, those communities to gather that information on their environment and make it available to the public via the smart citizen or the smart city platform. So that's customer number one, right? Customer number two is really who are those different vendors that are providing those open source platforms by which all this information is going to move through, all the transactions are going to happen. Customer number three, if you just think of the tech stack here, right? Customer number three is going to be who are those device manufacturers that are going to be putting all of those sensors everywhere and putting all of the towers up and making sure that all of the connectivity between them works, not just in terms of linkage, but in terms of MTM, the machine-to-machine transaction, which then becomes customer number four, which is the software side of it. And then, of course, keep going up the tech stack on the customer side. Then you've got to store this data somewhere. And then the last tech stack is you've got to do something with the data, right? So what are you going to do with it? Obviously, AI comes into play here. So AI becomes a customer, right, in terms of utilization of the data, monetization of the data, smart usage of the data, right? So you have, Norm, it's a really complex and extensive question for sure, but that customer really starts at the use level, and then really you just follow the tech stack, right, for a smart city in terms of that data management, that software and hardware connectivity, and then, of course, all of the data usage and monetization ability, or not, if you haven't built the whole system properly all the way up the tech stack, the customers move all the way up and down it.
That's really interesting. My sense as I listen to you, Michael, is we're going to have a lot of divergence in terms of the answer to this question. So I think you got us headed super in the right direction. Let's hear a little bit from Jung-Sung Hwang, lead researcher at National Information Society Agency, in terms of this question, because I really think this is an interesting question. How do you make a smart city customer centric?
Yeah, You give very difficult question. It's very difficult because city is a citizen customer. To be a customer, citizen have a choice. Have a choice between accept and reject. So citizen means someone who can accept or refuse on their will. But at the moment, citizen in many cases don't have such choice. Citizen is just a user, not customer. So. To your previous question, I talk about talk about active smart city that provide many functions and to enable citizens to do many things based on the resources smart city provide. But so making citizen customer is another dimension. So to make smart city citizen a customer, so then it is necessary to create open ecosystem and platform-based open ecosystem. So if the smart city is working just like the traditional city, I mean traditional city means that there's one way. The city control everything for infrastructure and public service. Then citizen remain still user, not customer. So to make a customer, city first develop a common public platform. Then enable, make every stakeholders, every players can access to the platform. So under some control for security or other reasons. So certain conditions should be met to make citizen a true customer. Okay, thank you.
That's very good. I'm going to change the order a little bit because I was intrigued by Professor Kwan's comments about how you bring in emerging market people. So Professor Kwan, do you want to talk a little bit about how maybe the customers are different between emerging market customers and advanced country or advanced city customers?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Anderson. And about that, the customers' questions, I can say that the two pages is there. The first one is about Dr. Hua has already said that the citizens, I think that it may be related with the inclusive plan, urban planning concept for that. I think that in this kind of the customers, the technologies should be developed for the benefit of the many citizens. We must be aware of that the technological gap and discrimination in every city. There is a discrimination for that. Some people is easily contact for this service, but the other cannot do that. So, and we must remember that the smart cities are more expensive to develop and expensive to manage and operate than traditional and conventional cities. Some people may not disagree on the distribution of their taxes to the expensive infrastructure, like that the IT technology base. A smart city will be sustainable only when the appropriate definition is implemented for that. That's why the governance is so important for this kind of the customers. I think that we focus on the technology today, but we need to focus more on the citizenship for that. And the second customer is, I think that the older people in the world, I think. Because let's think about that, the technologies developed through that digital platform in San Francisco created many players and vendors, service vendors, and this kind of .com companies create many services to the world, and many world citizens using their new technologies-based services for that. So this kind of the customers is extended to the outside of their each countries or cities for that. In South Korea, the research about and the development of smart city is focused on not only our country and our cities, but this technology service will be adapted to other countries and the cities. It may be that our goal or vision for this next future, the technologies or the development of the smart city, I think. It may be the answer for my think about the customers for the smart city technology. Thank you.
No, very good. We're opening up what we call a can of worms, I think, which is great. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Hey, Jen, let me go to you and ask you the same question. How do you bring customers into the smart city discussion, especially in a powerful way? I mean, it strikes me that that's pretty much what you're doing by monetizing data.
Yeah, so we take our example basically using models that have existed for almost over centuries in some cases. The model that we look at is when you had financial systems originate, right? What was the value to bringing financial systems and organizing them and structuring them? And what it really is that you're facilitating all the customers in an ecosystem. So in the case of data, just like any other commodity, there's a supply chain, right? So there's producers of data, there's consumers of data, there's analytic services that are drawn out of data, there are innovations that are drawn out of data. So the customers really have to look at where the value proposition lies. And until we can allow those customers to access this system and participate in the marketplace in a transparent way with fair pricing, with acknowledgement of where the data comes, with standardization and contractual deliverance, we can't have the risk management that's involved. And you have to have some form of a governance that people buy into to form that trust that they understand that the value is going to be brought back to them. In the case of the citizen, for instance, they're generating the data, but many times, even governments, they give that data away. And that data for their open services are never coming back to provide services back to the citizens. So there needs to be some sort of meta policy that's formed, which will also form standards across nations, across regions, but also be applied at a high level that trickles down to work within those regional areas that the data as a commodity may be different, maybe in that particular region, but data is data. And as the more those regions actually are able to communicate that data, the value of that data goes up and the value proposition to the customer actually goes up. So the bigger that we can create a marketplace and allow access to consume that information that's been derived by these sensor technologies, the more opportunity we provide to all the citizens because the innovation will be there. And the more that we can communicate, the more that we can enrich data with other data sources in a very stable marketplace, the better off we all are going to be because we lower everyone's risk and we actually increase the value of the return.
That's great. And, I guess some of you all know I have the privilege of teaching at a course at Smart Cities and Infrastructure at Seoul National University. And one of the students in our last class highlighted the fact that in terms of smart cities, you could argue that Asian countries have more confidence in the authority, let's say, or the ability of the public sector, the governance sector, to take agency, whereas we kind of in the U.S. and in the West, it's almost wholly to think about the citizens making all the decisions. So with that, observation, I think I'll turn to the last speaker in this round, Young-Sup Ju, and with your varied experience, it'll be interesting to hear how you talk about this issue of how do you put the customer at the center or give the customer at least more agency and choice in this whole discussion.
Okay, actually, there's no doubt about the fact that the smart cities must be built on a customer the centric manner rather than a technology centric manner. But actually, it doesn't mean actually we must follow the customer wants the customer needs only, because the customers or citizens do not have enough understanding or enough every information required to understand what kind of the smart cities they want and what kind of smart cities can be possible. So because of that, that's the reason why as you mentioned, the leadership is very important. So leaders needs to be provide citizens and people with that kind of the vision. So of course create consensus from the general public and citizens about that kind of vision. So by doing so, we can create a certain shared vision. Anyway, so in order to do so, one of the most practical way is to create a kind of test bed to showcase certain type of the model of the smart cities. So actually, in order to so we need to start with the identifying or creating very the idealistic or practically the optimal use cases. So we may identify very efficient, effective use cases by using the certain the test bed, by inviting all constituents of the municipalities or citizens to participate in those test bed. So I think that the Korea is a country starting a kind of the data dam projects by creating a lot of data. But at the same time, we need to understand what is the purpose of the collecting data. So actually by showing the people the certain the very nice scenario with using certain effective use cases. So we may come up with a very good consensus among people about the future picture of the smart cities.
That's very helpful. Let me stick with you for the next question to kick off the next round. I don't think it's fair that you go last every time. You have too much of an advantage. So let me stick with you. Can you, and I think it makes sense because you provided a segue for us. Can you give us a sense of what is really, what we would call the killer app, or what is as I said here, what's your favorite example of something that a smart city does that improves people's quality of life? Anything in terms of health, energy, environment, mobility, just a specific example, and then we'll go to Michael. But if we could stay with you, Young-Sup Ju, that would be great.
Start with me?
Yes, if you don't mind. I apologize. I'm moving around just to make sure that the people in the U.S. don't go to sleep.
Okay.
Now it's
okay, good.
2:30 in the morning in New York.
Yeah, of course, there are a lot of features which can attract the people and then make them understand the benefits of the smart city features. I think that among them, definitely smart mobility could be the most effective way to attract the people and persuade people with to create a certain shared vision. The actually among out of the a lot of the smart mobility features, I think that the smart navigation could be the one of the very practical and very useful applications. So actually these days the everybody is using navigation applications, but the sometimes the those navigation system is based upon the inaccurate the information and data about real-time the traffic situation. So by providing a better sensor system to monitor the traffic condition, we can create very smart navigation feature, the applications to the save traffic time and provide the people with the shortcut and time-consuming routing, utilizing that kind of the sensor data. So I think that that could be a very easy and very the effective way to effective example of the smart city features.
No, I think that's great. And I guess shipping is what, 3% of global carbon emissions. And so addressing that issue and making it more efficient makes a huge amount of sense. Michael, back to you. What from your point of view is the real killer app or a great example of a smart city application that really transforms people's lives?
Sure. So, killer app, you know, once it happens, it just explodes, right? It's like something going viral. As most people know, we're very fortunate. We're part of the family of companies of HN Group there in Seoul. So we're very lucky to be able to understand a lot of the wonderful innovation that happens in Korea on a daily basis that's so far ahead of the innovative trends that goes on here in the US. And of course, we're their global accelerator to take those trends and move them throughout different opportunities throughout the globe. So we get to see a lot of these different applications that are actually in use in Busan, in Seoul, in different cities throughout Korea, through our parent company. And one of the killer apps that we see out there and that we're also working on that are not yet complete, in the industry, that we'd love to be part of that completion solution for these killer apps, is the combination of all of this IoT data that's created, all the citizen data that's created in some kind of data exchange that's combining non-fungible tokens with DID on a blockchain protocol, but also with our other sister company, HDAC, Hyundai Digital Asset Currencies. HDAC is also creating a financial transaction exchange, for customers, for vendors, for financial institutions, for everyone to come together on a financial exchange to make that transaction much smoother, quicker, safer, and much more, client-friendly. So we're working on one of those potential killer apps, and we think that combining that all of that data, and Jennifer knows this better than anybody, right? It's all about the data in all these smart cities, and combining that user environmental open source data that's created on a daily basis, all of those financial transactions with our other sister company, HDAC, finding a way to make that into the behind the scenes use of every vendor, company, citizen, government, entity, et cetera, part of that smart city environment, and making it all seamless and working together, that it would be a killer app.
That's great. Thanks, Michael. And I think giving people a vision like you just did of where this is going and how to think forward in terms of technologies, fantastic. Could we go to Jung-Sung Hwang, lead researcher, National Information Society Agency, to answer this question about what do you see in terms of a real application that's going to make a difference or is making a difference in a smart city? Because, often when I talk to people about smart cities, they go, I don't understand what that is. And so it's very useful to have a specific idea or application.
Yeah, in terms of impact, I think CCTV. So many people don't like CCTV, but in terms of impact, so CCTV has made the great contribution to in solving urban problems, and also we can think about location-based services. So location, mobile technology and location devices like the GPS. Enhance, improve the public service and many private services a lot. So I think there are several visual applications and technologies. But on the other hand, there are also invisible, invisible to users, invisible applications. So I think geospatial data is very critical to upgrading urban management and public services. The Professor talked about transportation and the traffic management service. So most of those applications actually are based on, rely on geospatial data. And so, the Seoul is very, in fact, advanced than other cities. If someone asks me, what is the best smart city in the world? So I guess many others, propose Singapore, and so many cities. But I believe Seoul is very advanced in many ways than other cities. That's why. So if you look at how Seoul metropolitan government manages geospatial data, then you will realize all data are interconnected, and there are open ecosystem that any department and any company to develop geospatial related service, then they can help them substantially. So there are hidden technology and resources that support at the moment smart city development. Thank you.
That's very good. Super interesting as well. Jen, let's go to you and get a sense from your perspective of what's really a benefit, killer app, smart cities.
I think one of the latest things that I found an interest in is the digital twin technologies. This is a little interesting on our part because what it does is it provides a tool, like a command center tool, to the city to actually have that geospatial information and all that other sensor information centralized and shown together in a useful manner. Additionally, it allows an acknowledgement that you could use the information but not also put it at risk. So a lot of the big stuff that's going on right now with cities is ransomware, right? Where people come in and they hold their data, and it's a really bad, situation for, cities with very limited budgets that, get held ransom for this. So these digital twins, I've seen have a lot of purpose and actual things that they could be used for, which benefit not only the public sector, but also allows you to have what I call a value in a digital real estate form. Something that could be titled and leased out, very similarly in contracts they would have for regular real estate. So these, combined with geospatial, technologies. Another one that I find that has absolutely changed the world is LiDAR. I think LiDAR is one of the greatest technologies that are formed in, some of this information that we gather as it goes through a city. One of the things that people don't think about is that LiDAR can be used both ways. For instance, LiDAR helps a car company understand the roads and read the signals, but it also helps cities understand where their potholes are. That communication between the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, and the public sectors is very important. And if we can do that in real time with some of these technologies, and facilitate that contractual exchange in a risk-free way, that we're actually going to get somewhere. We're going to actually move this data so quickly, it's going to actually change the world very, very quickly.
Very good. That's really, really super interesting. Professor Kwan, you get to bring in the emerging market perspective again. Are you actually in Indonesia designing the city, or are you someplace else?
Yeah, there's something very convenient from the customers or the citizens for that in Korea. It is offered by that the coupon. It's recently they entered the Nasdaq in US. I think
Right.
that this is maybe the Korean Amazon for that. And there's a service about that recommend and purchase the goods, and it guess maybe Professor Kwon needed this stuff like this water, and I think that the city buys what he think I want and pay for them automatically, and even delivers for that. And the delivery process is guided by the low level of digital twins. And it is a very the exotic service. But on the other hand, I feel like I'm becoming more and more stupid and lazy people. But maybe the smart city and the dumb citizens. And maybe, but I think it's a good model for the service providers and the service vendors for that, I think. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. No, that's really fantastic. We have one more round, and I think we have about 10 minutes left, so I think we're in pretty good shape. Look, Michael, I think you're a perfect person to lead us off in terms of this question. When I was in Seoul, we had a lot of discussions about how the U.S. and Korea can better cooperate around 5G and other issues. But what would be your idea about how the U.S. and Korea can cooperate on smart cities? Is there a good way to answer that question?
Sure, thank you. I'll be brief to give other people time to speak since we only have a few minutes left, but there's so many opportunities that the U.S. needs help with. As we, unfortunately, as an American, it's hard to say, but we are just so far behind on digital infrastructure and electrification of our cities, mainly because of budgeting, right? The budgeting just has not been there. The Build Back Better initiative is coming along here in the U.S. and the Green New Deal in Korea. The combination of those two initiatives by our great governments are just wonderful. So I think we need to be encouraging of pushing a lot of that funding for those initiatives towards the digitization and electrification of our cities in America, utilizing applications that are already complete in Korea. Since we're still behind Korea, it's not that we have to build something new. We have to create something novel, right? There's so many great things that have already been done with mobilization, applications with the blockchain, the accounting systems using, blockchain systems for accounting as well. The simple thing of the highways in Korea is just fantastic, right? That there's really so few, if any, motorized police on your interstate highway system because you have all of those, devices that are clocking your speed every mile or every kilometer. Right? I wish we had that here in the U.S. Because we could divert more funding.
I don't, but that's okay.
You don't. I like it. But definitely there's just so many applications. And the one thing that we haven't talked about, we talked so much about digitization and electrification and everything else. But let's not forget that we all have to live somewhere. We all have to work inside some kind of structure. So smart building is also a big application, right? We also happen to do 3D construction printing here in the U.S. and also with our sister company HYSYS there in Korea. That's a big trend that's starting to move throughout the globe, in the Middle East, in the United States, in Europe, in Southeast Asia, et cetera. China is killing it with 3D construction printing, not just for housing and commercial and industrial, but most especially for infrastructure, for precast, et cetera. So not only do we want to be able to look at many digital applications, but let's also look at the physical smart building applications as well in the future to be able to coordinate between the U.S. and Korea.
That's great. Thank you very much, Michael. And for our lead researcher, Jung-Sung Hwang, do you have an answer to that question? Is there a good way for the U.S.? Is that an important question for the U.S. and Korea to cooperate in smart cities?
Yeah, I think so. What I like to ask to U.S. to do for the Korea is to help platform interoperability. Platform interoperability is also, in fact, I think everything of smart city, whatever smart city you have in your mind. But so we need to create platform interoperability. So within city, there are many platforms. So we have to find ways to connect them each other, and also. There are private platforms like Korean platforms like KT and Kakao, Naver, and also global platforms Amazon, Google, and many platforms. So the problem is that such private platform don't fit with the real space. So let's think about your neighbor. Your neighbor people use different platforms, different global platforms. So we need to anyway find ways to reorganize the data or reorganize so people not based on what platform they use, but based on where they live, based on the neighbors, so the real place. In our smart city policy, in the back office, the more critical issue is to secure platform interoperability. But actually it's out of our reach. So I think if we develop a partnership between Korea and United States, government, company, and industry to promote the platform interoperability, then I think it will be beneficial to both countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great. And Jen, I see that you're in violent agreement with the previous speaker on that issue. Do you want to talk a little bit about how the U.S. and Korea might cooperate?
Yeah, so we'll give you a little bit of background. The regions like U.S., Korea, other countries, when you're developing any global network, it's always going to start off organically. But again, it really relies on that interoperability. And the way that you get the interoperability is to create what is considered meta policy. Meta policy is how are these exchange nodes that are going to exchange information across borders, how are they going to communicate and who's going to set those standards? And that's where we have to collaborate and we have to create systems that are global. This has occurred. It's occurred in every financial system that's out there that moves money around the world, right? And then payment systems are data systems, but they got together with a membership and they actually realized that meta policy sitting to get that interoperability down pat, creating open standards that people can adopt the system in a safe way. That has the number one thing that we need to work on, because that's the only way that a system can actually work in a global way. That's it. It really relies on that interoperability and self-sustaining.
And it's very interesting too, because Professor Hwang was talking about almost a public platform interoperability rather than all the private platforms we have, and that would drive public goods creation, which is a lot of what smart
like
cities
utility.
do. Yeah,
They need to look like a utility, correct.
I think that's really great. That makes a huge amount of sense. Let me go to Young-Sub Ju, the Distinguished Professor of Smart Cities at Seoul National University. If we could get a sense from you of how the U.S. and Korea should cooperate.
Okay, I think that there will be a lot of areas where the U.S. and Korean university, the companies or the researchers work together. Actually, as you know, the all enabling technologies of the smart cities are changing so fast. So one company or even one country cannot handle the speed of change. So that's the reason why we need to cooperate each other. So actually, I used to be engaged with the Korean government as a minister of the SMEs, small and medium enterprises and startups. At that time, I have been making a lot of efforts to nurture the Korean startups. Actually, those startups are currently working very nicely in the area of the smart cities too, because the smart city includes every important digital transformation technologies, or rather the very advanced technologies, including AI, IoT, and 5G, and cloud, and digital twins, as she said. Actually, by creating a kind of common the smart city pilot projects between U.S. and Korea, or we may maintaining two separate pilot projects, and then inviting the U.S. The startups as well as the Korean startups to those pilot projects. That is the best way to create. Not only develop the technology, but also create very sustainable business models to make the U.S. and Korea collaboration very sustainable.
That makes a lot of sense, and it reminds me of one of the insights I think that came out of our last visit in South Korea, where we realized that the U.S. probably doesn't have a normal institutional counterpart on the 5G issue, and it's probably the same with smart cities. It's unclear to me who in Washington would be the counterparty. So I think that's a really important point. And I think now we want to hear from, and I think you're going to be our last speaker, Professor Kwon, but as Michael suggested, the Biden administration has a Build Back Better approach, but they have a Build Back Better world approach, and we've been working with Professor Hwang to make sure that the U.S. and Korea work together on that project. So is there a way for the U.S. and Korea to work together in emerging market smart cities projects? Does it make sense? Is it helpful?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Anderson. The cooperation between the Korea and the U.S. is have some clues in that the U.S. have, but Korea don't have, or controversially that. I think that the Korea has a very unique the corporate culture, and there's the cases where the construction company and the IT companies are tied up in one group, such as that for example, the Samsung has a construction company and a semiconductor factories for that, and it is a very unique. But I don't think that the U.S. has this case for like that one. So they built and developed IoT or data science and create new online the business models for that. So I think we can work together in that kind of that one. For example, the U.S. has that very strong and competitive the .com companies, or the basic the technologies, science, and Korea has that this kind of the unique companies like that. We call it that the Jebol for that in Korean language.
Right.
It is another the opportunities because that the Korea, near that the Korea, there is lots of the developing countries adapting that smart city technologies or the built and the new infrastructure adapting that smart city technologies for near that Korean. It is a very geographically chance to that the U.S. and the Korea co-work together, I think. Thank you.
No, I think this is fantastic. I want to thank everybody. This was a marvelous discussion from my point of view. Hugely interesting, hugely valuable. So if we could give everybody a round of applause, and then we'll turn it over to Ms. Min Soo. Thank you very much.
I appreciate all of the speakers sharing insightful perspectives with us. We'll move on to the second session, titled GSCL 2030 through Digital Transformation. This session will be moderated by Professor Jun-seok Hwang, Director of BK21 HRD Program of Smart City Global Convergence at Seoul National University. We have 5 panelists lined up in this panel discussion. Tony Cho is the CEO and founder of Future of Cities, and Mr. Frank Friesaker is Vice President of IoT and Smart City Strategy and Innovation at Blockchains. And Dr. Hyuk Jung is a professor in Graduate School of International Studies at Seoul National University. And Dr. Jun-seok Hwang is a professor in the Department of Landscape Architecture and Rural System Engineering at Seoul National University. Lastly, Dr. Yong-hwan Kim is the CEO of Smart Radar System. For this session, thank you. Mr. Tony Cho and Mr. Frank Friesaker and Professor Hyuk Jung participate in this session virtually. Please give a warm welcome to Professor Jun-seok Hwang and all of the panelists. Professor Jun-seok Hwang, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Jung. And first of all, I'd like to thank all the panelists. It will be a similar format of previous session, but the reason we say panel discussion was actually we shared the common questions, but we have another objective. Additionally, we try to build some common concept, around the question instead of individual perspective. So, hope we refer each other also of previous commentator, and then probably whether your idea can be complement or be to build add up common comments. I shared actually 4 key leadership questions for the panelists, and out of that, actually, I decided to do first 3, and the last one, quite relevant and also redundant with the previous about the Korea-United States partnership or possible activities. My first question, which I shared, were how the global smart cities may require the global smart city citizenship. And then if such citizenship exists, or we already have or we may have, what would be your description and understanding about global citizenship? Definitely, I think we are in the very new probably stage and in let's say smart city renaissance. But finally, this city will have full of residents or citizens who will live in smart cities, and hope we should have certain expectation about it. I'd like to ask Tony Cho, who is actually founder of Future of Cities. I believe you have, Tony, you have a very forward-looking also expectation about how our society should be and how also to be, smart citizen in the future. And what is your understanding about the smart citizenship?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here. I wanted to also recognize my colleague, Michael Woods from Sun Holdings, and all the rest of my esteemed panelists. I am actually adopted by a South Korean martial arts master, and feel very proud to be participating in this panel with you all. My passion is around really kind of the intersection of community, technology, and innovation, and really how do we co-create and co-design cities of the future that are equitable, that are regenerative, and that are sustainable. And so a lot of our focus today has been on the technology stack, on the tech side, but a lot of what we're focused on is kind of the approach to co-designing these cities, leveraging the technologies, but in support of human needs and really improving the quality of life and increasing equity within those cities. So I think a key component of really achieving regenerative, equitable, smart cities, the ones that we all envision collectively, is really gaining consensus. But I also think it's about open sourcing best practices and demonstration projects from all over the world and really stop working in silos and funnels. You know, the public and private sector and foundations and all aspects of society and all industries need to collaborate. I use the analogy about the pandemic and how, you know, the entire scientific, pharmaceutical, and public sector came together to really search for a cure for the pandemic and for COVID-19. And although we're still struggling, you know, with the variants and the mutations of the virus, you know, the fact remains is that incredible innovations were achieved because there was incredible coordination and there was incredible collaboration between and among many different countries, many different industries, and many different public and private sectors working together. The same is now required is that education of that citizen is really providing the data. But you have 1.7 billion people in the world who are unconnected, who don't have access to clean water and healthy food and a roof over their head. That's a big problem, but that's a huge opportunity in my mind. And so you won't achieve equity and you won't be able to create smart cities until you provide connectivity to everybody. And you really focus kind of on the human components. But a lot of it starts with inclusion and being fully participatory in the process to address creating these smart cities. And have you seen with Google Sidewalk Labs in Toronto, you know, the community just basically rejected the project. And so there's, in the United States and in Canada, North America in particular, there's a huge mistrust in government and the public sector. And we have to build that trust and we have to decentralize information. And I think blockchain is going to play a key role to democratizing access to real estate. And so I think leveraging those types of technology is really going to accelerate this transition to a more equitable smart city, and leveraging the technologies that are existent and building consensus and stop working kind of in competition. These are solutions that are needed all over the world in every country. And I think it's really critical for the United States and South Korea to work together. You know, our Asian, you know, democratic counterpart that is in many ways, as many other panelists said, is much more advanced than us, technologically speaking, with basically bringing the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure, to a place where we can achieve the goals that we have for a smart city.
Thank you very much, Tony. I'd like to actually ask Professor Kang Jun-seok, how would you respond as a green technology also experts, and also relying on probably considering infrastructure aspects of the green building and green infrastructure. How would you respond to Tony's actually understanding on smart citizenship?
Yeah. So. Yeah, I thought about. I thank you, Tony. I thought about that question also as well. So, I think some definition or description for understanding about global citizenship. Let me answer or try to answer that question. Think about two things. First one is what is the smart citizenship, and then how to achieve smart citizenship. And second thing, including global, how to achieve global citizenship. So first thing, leaders need to provide answer that first question. So I think smart citizenship is not free, as you know. For example, one of the biggest smart city project is the National Strategic Smart City Project. And yesterday, a result announced, and also Director Hwang also involved in living lab and seeing. So best way of the citizen involved in smart project is in Korea, Daegu in use case, and then seeing is the living lab. So that is the best way the citizen to be involved in the government policy and vision, and then gradually there would be a smart citizen. And the second thing, it's top global. It's possible global smart citizenship. So, as you pointed out, Professor in the morning, afternoon, Martin. So, smart or smartness is very unique. No, I mean, case by case. I mean, it's not monolithic. Maybe same meaning. So. That global, so leader have to provide so good consensus-based decision-making process for the all over the world. So that also we are responsible for that. So let me wrap up at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you relate that also smart citizenship in such probably lead us to the need of also leadership on the global practice, and which include a lot of our humanity actually face. And recently, actually, Tony and I have been actually discussing about the recent disaster coming natural, like a natural disaster actually changes over there in our globe, and which probably changed how traditional cities has been affected, and finally, and also how that actually give a problem to the existing cities, and instead of rebuilding in the cities. Well, as a global expert of international development, I'd like to ask Professor Jung Hyuk from the Graduate School of International Studies of SNU to respond your wisdom on the citizenship and global smart citizenship.
Okay, thank you. I'm a basically development economist with some macroeconomic and international perspective and for the global prosperity. And I'd like to pitch some of my opinions about the smart city, global smart city citizenship. I guess before we talk about the smart city citizenship or some priorities for the smart city development, we need to clarify what would be the goals of those citizenship. As Tony just suggested, the role of community would be important. And in the first session, actually, there were lots of related discussions came up, like customer-centered. But to lay out some basic goals to discuss about those concepts, I think first thing we need to think about is what kinds of global perspective. Are we talking about like reaching out the global markets? Or are we talking about like providing some global public goods? So in what dimension the smart city can be helpful in achieving either of these? Or we also need to recognize the approach, whether it would be the tech-based or the people-based. And then, in fact, there can be some tensions or synergy depending on what kinds of implementation method we're using. So I think we need to discuss these fundamental issues first. And my personal position is smart city would be successful in spreading to the globe when we take like a second approach rather than the first approach. Also, I think to share rather than just the business sales or the profits, sharing the idea is the key rather than just forming the simple network of businesses. So for that part, I'm not saying that the business model is not important. It's actually the core, because only with the sustainable business models we can continue to interact around the globe. However, whether those dimensions and scope of cooperation are kind of organized around these, like cooperation around the sales of profits or around the idea sharing, we may have a little different approaches to promote this concept of smart city to the globe. So for the remaining discussions, perhaps I can elaborate on this, but that's the first thing I would like to shed on this discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Jung. Well, I think the previous three panelists actually gave a kind of certain common sense of smartness actually has also very unique and cultural and local capability, but at the same time also global humanity and also improved human nature. At the same time, also social content out of it, and also not just only technology innovation. I'd like to actually relate this one into the citizenship need and also concept of smartness and global on the citizenship side. How would we actually have a certain citizenship to be either promoted and also matured and also diffused more within our society by good leadership? I believe actually the reason that we have this first global smart city leadership in this forum is smart city actually development needs a good leader. And also smart city citizenship need a good leader that would actually relate and listen to the good smart citizenship. I'd like to ask Dr. Yong-Hwan Kim, who is the CEO and the founder of a global, founder of the Smart Radar System, who have a very unique technology, who can hear actually a lot of things, including the human voice, human mobility, and through the radar system. Dr. Kim, would you please give your wisdom for us for leadership?
Thank you. It's so good to see all the friends, especially Frank. Are you calling from Canada right now? Must be. I think we do have a very unique perspective when you approach a smart city. In order to connect the technology from South Korea to United States, we need someone who understands both cultures as well as technology. Before I founded this smart radar system as a kind of a building cornerstone for the smart city, I used to read the smart city business inside a big company, and then went to Dubai and then come up with a vision, trying to do everything at once. But now I'm having a different approach, working with a company called the BG Lion Star, which was introduced by Norman Anderson. Together, we are working on renovating a small area in St. Louis, which we call micro smart city. In that case, initially, we proposed to use image radar to help the veterans who's going to live in that area. But later on, we need to kind of come up with a bigger scope of the smart city technology to help the entire community. So the problem is how we're going to kind of connect the technology from Korea to United States. In order to do that, we definitely need a kind of a platform which can kind of shop all the technologies and then being able to install or make an action inside the United States. So for my case, the kind of leadership we need to for the smart city is not just a vision. We need someone who actually be able to go out and then execute the plan. So, and then in order to do that, it doesn't have to be a bigger scope of a smart city. It could be a very small a community enhancement, or could it be a micro level kind of a smart city? So now it's a time. That's why we are expanding our organization into Silicon Valley to carry out this kind of business. And then in that case, we definitely will work with many technology provider to help innovate the community. So this is kind of a new kind of a leadership we need.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Actually, you're very active and agile and adaptive leadership into the very dynamic international environment, and also congratulations for your also new market creation and also business in the United States. I'd like to go back to Tony back again. I believe actually through the smart city, everyone, both leaders and also many people and developers are expecting or experiencing new community. Or, we are probably creating maybe new community we want to have, that all want to keep or grow the community we have now. And in such kind of assumption or interaction we are going now, how would you say, what kind of leadership do we need for such global citizens, cities and citizenship? Tony?
What was the last word? What kind of what do we need for global citizens?
I mean the leadership.
What kind of
leadership. Leadership.
We need leadership that's visionary, but that's also pragmatic. Because I think, again, going back to where we were before, it's about education. Many people don't even understand what smart cities are. And what we talked about before, for me, I think it's really to work in the context of wise cities, taking ancient traditions and ancient technologies, indigenous technologies, and combining them, respecting the cultures. Every place has a story of place. Every place has a unique culture, has a unique geography, has a unique history. And I think that we can layer smart city solutions and technology stacks over and integrate them with the existing culture, provided that it's not really disrupting those cultures. And so I think leadership needs to have diverse perspectives. So each place needs to have local representation, local leadership that understands the specific cultural idiosyncrasies and specialities that each place has. And that's really how we start really defining the story of place, which can define those leaders and build trust. And so essentially what it is it's like we were saying before, it's really important that you don't need to build a massive smart city to do a demonstration project. Every project can be a living laboratory. And instead of telling people what a smart city is, you have to show them what a smart city is and what it means. It's different in Seoul than it may be in Detroit, and it may be in London or Paris or Milan or other places all over the world. Every community, every neighborhood, every city should have the opportunity to co-design their best outcomes, leveraging the best practices of smart cities, leveraging the technologies, leveraging the solutions. So I think there's global leadership that needs to collaborate with local leadership at all levels of society. And it's very critical to have a diverse perspective of people, male, female, every background, every socioeconomic representation involved in the process. That's the only way that you're going to have the best outcomes, and you're going to have the best harmony, and not have this distrust of data collection, data privacy, distrust of government, lack of consensus, and all of these things. So leadership really needs to build consensus and build trust. And it can't necessarily be from the top down, it has to be from the bottom up. So we need to identify leaders within the local communities that can be educated in equitable, smart cities, wise cities, regenerative cities that are really going to be something that are going to be addressing the major problems. And I think the way that we can align as a global community, as global smart city citizens, is around the biggest challenges that we face. One of the biggest challenges we face, as everyone knows today, is the climate crisis. The the built environment, the construction industry, the development industry, infrastructure accounts for roughly 50% of CO2 emissions in the world. So unless we disrupt that industry by leveraging these types of technologies, 3D printing, hempcrete, carbon capturing concrete, the built environment and the building industry has not innovated in over 100 years. We're still building the same way, and particularly in North America. In Asia, and what Michael was saying, in China, from 3D printing and that standpoint, Asia is much more advanced than the United States. But it's not about one country being advanced. This needs to be a global transformation. So we need to open source and share these best practices because it's a matter of survival of our civilization more than anything. And I don't think people realize that. We're kind of getting past this post-competitive, post-capitalistic model into something that has to be more regenerative and that accounts for the externalities of unbridled capitalism that's just focusing on profit. So as someone who's a futurist and a technologist and also a community activist, how do we marry those two? And I think that the answer to the question is diversity of representation in leadership, really seeking out diversity. And I think that's one way we're going to be able to build consensus and build trust among a broad audience of people.
Thank you very much, Tony. Very inspiring also a message from you. Relaying in your kind of leadership necessity, for the smart city, with the vision and also pragmatism, especially in the very diverse environment and with local value and also global value. I'd like to invite Frank, who's actually working in both New York and also Nevada, but also also inventing a new city, all right, out of desert, which need a lot of ambition with your company in blockchains, and two, give what kind of leadership we might need in such kind of environment, from your also experience, what you are doing in your project. At the same time, I'd like to, after that, invite Professor Jung-hyuk, who have been actually involved in many international and also developing and developed work in our project, how such kind of leadership can be promoted in both countries. If we don't have, or current leadership is still lacking in such for the upcoming smart city, and then what we should do. So I'd like to ask Frank to give your thinking first, and then Professor Jung-hyuk.
Sure, thank you, and thank you for having me here at this great event. I want to build on some of the things that Tony said. I agree about diversity, understanding the communities and the sort of global impacts of smart cities. When you're digital really doesn't have boundaries. It can be very hyper-localized, or it can be interacting with other smart cities around the world. So having some leadership that understands sort of the hyper-local issues, that can use the new tools that we have with sensors and big data and AI to address very, very local community, neighborhood issues, but at the same time, create bridges to other smart cities, and create bridges to other countries around the world, and create that global citizenship that we talked about earlier. Someone that can navigate that. But it's also diversity in functional capabilities. And what I mean by that is, we're facing this right now. We're building a city based on a smart city based on blockchain. We feel that blockchain brings an element of trust. We've heard trust a number of times tonight, and until the issue of trust can really be addressed, it's hard to move into the new frontiers that are possible. And we feel like blockchain can bring that fabric of trust to overlay all the current IoT and big data systems to really open up sort of new venues. And I think the leadership needs to know how to use these tools. We have a lot of new tools at our disposal, big data, marketplaces for apps that make use of the data, cultural, or I should say citizen engagement with government services delivered at a hyper-local level, or at a macro level across the smart city or between cities, having leaders that understand the various tools at their disposal and can marry them with policy and governance that almost automate the governments at a decentralized level throughout a city. Things like that, having that sort of leadership, I think, can really drive this new frontier forward.
Thank you. Professor Jung, you may add.
I guess the crucial points are already made, but I'd like to add one more thing about leadership in making this smart city as a global. Well, recognizing the local needs and the diversity is key, but at the same time, at the global level, I think establishing some architecture of the idea searching and sharing is also important, because we may figure out what kinds of diversities are there in the local areas, in either advanced economies or developing countries. But simple meeting of the local needs may not extend the true potential of the smart city, because as Frank just pointed out, the smart city tech can be really applied at the global level, and solving some global problems like climate changes, not just the community problems. To make that happen, perhaps extending the scope of cooperation in two dimensions may be very helpful. One, in interdisciplinary collaboration between development perspective and the engineering or the technology perspective. Because from the development perspective, you can better identify what are the true needs, and this engineering and science perspective would provide what can be the solutions that fits the needs. So this kind of direct dialogues and communication between the two disciplines seems to be very important. And also, in the second dimension would be the cross-country collaboration. For example, like a US-Korea collaboration may be very important, in particular widening the scope of idea searching. Ideas are really spread. It's not concentrated in either advanced economies or developing economies. So to do that, maybe mobilizing there are startups everywhere who propose new technologies and new ideas, but consolidating the relevant ideas to develop into the useful knowledge and technology, there may be we may need some kinds of platform. And indeed, from the experience and the technology of the smart city, not just for smart city technology, but technology in general, there is a big room for collaboration between the US and Korea. It's not because the areas of the comparative advantages differ, rather than that, but because by making or widening the scope of collaboration cross-country would just increasing the pool of idea search. And in fact, the US-Korea collaboration may extend the pool itself at the global level. So for those two dimensions, I think there should be an explicit role, even at the global level, in harmonizing with this, meeting the local needs and diversity.
Thank you, both Tony and Professor Jung. And naturally, I think your comments actually give me the chance to move on to our last, final, and also monumental discussion. I'd like everyone actually comment if you can. So our final discussion actually, point is what would be the three priority fields, if you can, that Global Smart City Leaders Forum work together as a strategic community of practice, especially for next year. I think this forum will be held in this, expo, possibly and every year, and hope, we have a very strategic cooperation through and being a platform for that. So, I'd like to ask Professor Dr. Yong-Han Kim and also Professor Yong-Han Kim, who is actually also a professor at SMU, is teaching in Smart City Global Convergence Program. So, Professor Kim, would you please, give us some directions that, three field we may focus on?
Basically, it's not just the three fields. We have so many fields, but I like to focus on the three fields. The first one is definitely mobility, but that's not going to be a problem we can solve in such a short time frame. But we want to live in a society where we cut down the commuting hours and then being able to get the time back for our own life. So mobility will be the crucial kind of agenda. But another agenda will be a healthcare, because we are living in a very aged society, and then we need to support the kind of underserved communities as well. For that, we're going to work with the blockchain to enable image radar system for healthcare systems in the United States. But when it comes to technology, it's quite amazing. Even though the technology is originated from Korea, it could be directly applied to the United States as well. For my case, I live in both San Francisco and then Seoul. Every time I go to San Francisco, I feel like I'm in Seoul again, because I go to Baekjongwon restaurant and then other Korean restaurants, and then sometimes I get confused. Likewise, the technology does not have any nationality attached, so it could be applied to many cases. Now we are seeing a huge demand in the healthcare side. The last one is security. I like the technology made by the company called Ring. I believe they were acquired by Google. And then in the States, where you buy a camera system from the Ring, then it's just a simple sensor, but they do have a data kind of a notion. So it is connected throughout the community. So once everything weird thing happens, for example, someone comes to your house and then take your Amazon parcels away, then they're going to send the alarm message to entire community. That way, all of a sudden, sensor will have a life because it has a connectivity and then associated the data. So this kind of security will be the key kind of component for the smart city.
Thank you very much. Definitely, the security infrastructure should be there. We will be dealing with a lot of data, and then in smart way. Thank you, Professor Kim and Professor Kang. You and I have the same first name, Chun-seok, but we are working on different fields. You are in the more green innovation infrastructure. I'm more on the smart infrastructure. But in smart city aspects, we both agree that these green values and smart values are not separable. And also there are a lot of environmental and also not only the environmental energy related issues and future infrastructure issues. So Professor Kang, how did you, probably summarize your idea into three fields we may focus on as a leader?
Yes. Yeah, I think let me tell you three things. So time is running out. So first thing, I think a leaders forum clearly need to provide well-organized educational platform. So continuously we need to provide the education information to the global smart citizen or global potential smart citizen. How to do that? I think digital transformation might have a significant role in this area. So technology every day emerging, so to catch up to that speed, I think digital transformation important, and also another Jun-seok also emphasizing that on. And second thing, leaders forum have to provide direction or way. So I think there is no standard. What is the smart city or not? So we need to set up the smart city rating system. For example, Seoul or smart city level platinum or Singapore more platinum double or platinum A, something like that. Anyway, we need to provide a rating system. And third thing, leader have to keep in mind always balanced. So even if technology important, however, humanity and sustainability is still important. So a smart city can be sustainable through overcoming the climate crisis. So maybe future smart city also seems like a carbon neutral or climate crisis free city. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kang. That definitely that smart city, probably probably expect leaders with very inclusive values, for the society. Frank, I'd like to invite you also, your expectation about the leadership and also the three fields of, along with, that may we, as a community, strategic community of practice together, and then we can focus on for following years.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to pick up on something Dr. Weiss said at the beginning, and he was illustrating how TCP/IP came into being and how important it was as sort of a common networking protocol that had guaranteed delivery of data, et cetera. And I feel like we're at a new point with smart cities in terms of the infrastructure. We've done a great job of digitizing cities. We're doing a great job of collecting the massive amounts of data and applying AI, et cetera. But I think the new challenge is really looking at how do we collaborate on standards and technologies for creating a trusted digital infrastructure, one that as we proliferate these systems of systems, it's getting more complex. There are also different manufacturers, many different protocols, and many different use cases. Some use cases are not so serious, maybe like digital parking or lighting, and some are very serious. They may be emergency response, medical, et cetera, almost having tiered levels of service and things like that. I think there's a lot of work we can do in defining a new digital infrastructure that brings in a layer of trust and accountability, and most of all, security. We can't afford to have hacks to our critical infrastructure. People need to have trust in the system. All these things, I think, distill down to looking at digital infrastructure, and almost like when HTTP, if you remember this, became HTTPS, with the S for secure connection, people suddenly started using the internet for e-commerce, and we got into a whole new world. I think smart cities need that next level of trusted digital infrastructure. So I think that's one big area. I know the others have mentioned this, but I totally agree. I think mobility, having smart mobility can address so many issues, quality of life, regaining our real estate in the cities. If you look today, how much real estate is used up by roadways and parking and gas stations and all the rest. It's a lot of space that could really be reclaimed for people again, and at the same time reduce pollution and accidents and other things. So if we can address mobility with new micro mobility, sharing of scooters, which is a very popular thing right now, autonomous vehicles, electrification, they solve a lot of problems all at once. And it needs to be designed in from the beginning. And lastly, and relatedly, is what everyone else has also mentioned, is this environmental sustainability and in our response to climate change. We have a lot of tools now with sensors. Our company in particular is doing a lot of work in the energy sector to bring blockchain into tracking the sources of renewable energy, providing credits for renewable energies like solar and wind, and then also acknowledging geothermal, other types of energy. And right from production through consumption, as we charge our electric vehicles or we heat or air condition our homes, having that complete view and allowing us to balance the needs across the city and across our lives. That's all possible now, and we can make a big dent in how the how climate change is affecting things. So I think those three areas would be what I'd be looking at.
Yep. Thank you, Frank. The security and mobility and environmental sustainability as a key field. Thank you, appreciate that. As a last two commentators, one from Korea, one from the United States, Professor Jung Hyuk, you already mentioned some of the action field, but as a last comment and others, would you maybe add or summarize or integrate some of the things that we mentioned from Korean or international aspects, the three fields. And I'd like to invite also same way from Tony. So, Jung-hyuk first.
Okay, thank you. From some little kind of fundamental picture, I'd like to propose for this leadership forum to create an architecture of finance and idea matching, because we have talked about what kinds of smart city technologies can be applied, but those technologies are perhaps already available, but we are also interested in creating new technologies and new ideas, but which needs funding. So, and which also requires the financial scheme. So that can be one thing, this architecture of a global architecture of matching between ideas and finance. That's one. Then second comment that I would like to add is related to some international development perspective, which is in terms of areas applying this smart technology. From the developing countries' perspective, three areas are quite pending and urgent. One is health. We perhaps do not want to monitor the people's mobility, but the mobility of the virus. So for that one, this public health application is very crucial. And also this housing itself is really lagging behind in those regions. So, and the final thing is climate change. We'd like to, I hope this forum would like to identify its true impacts on these climate changes by designing a better city. So for those three areas, maybe I hope this forum would make as a focal point, not entire list, but at least the inclusion of these three issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jung. And Tony, the last but not the least. You are muted, Tony, probably. Yeah.
Oh, I apologize. So many good ideas have already been put forward, so I definitely have a challenge to kind of add some additional stuff. But I think one area that we haven't discussed properly that I may offer as an area that I think should be standardized and should be promoted is the public policy component. Because if you don't have the urban planners, the city planners, the policy makers from a regional, statewide, federal, national, international level, you're not going to be able to implement these technologies, these innovative ideas, these land planning solutions, de-emphasizing the automobile, doing away with parking, all these progressive ideas that we, I think, here in this group, in this collective, agree upon. But we need to educate our public policy makers and our elected politicians and elected representatives to understand the benefits of smart cities and how it's going to help enhance the lives of human beings and other species as well, all living beings within the planet. If we have cleaner air, cleaner water, we have smarter cities, wiser cities. It should be for the benefit of everybody at all levels of society. And this should be able to spread. So I think the standardization of these solutions and the cross-sector collaboration and the interoperability and the flexibility, as was discussed earlier, I think are really kind of something that I would put forth for this forum to study, is really what kind of best practices and standards. We have a framework of new sustainable development framework that we're working on in Future of Cities that's called regenerative placemaking. And it's essentially taking the principles of regenerative development, which is equitable, inclusive, participatory development process that takes into consideration all human and non-human considerations, the story of place, sustainability, equity, inclusion, all these components, smart city applications together, and to create living laboratories. And that's really kind of a framework. So like that, I think there needs to be a framework and a metrics leveraging that data of those smart cities to really provide us the information so that we can achieve net zero, so that we can achieve climate positive. So I think I'm very much in alignment on that, on the public policy and the advocacy side. One thing that we haven't really addressed also is the food crisis. We're in a situation where a lot of people are leaving cities, particularly because of the pandemic, and they're spreading out, and we're going back into this suburban and urban sprawl, and there's this anti-development sentiment. And so that comes in with crafting smart city policies and regenerative ideas around development, because all development is not bad. We want to do intelligent and inclusive development that is really going to be solving for the 99%. Which brings me to another point that was mentioned before, is affordable, attainable housing. We're not providing enough of the right housing, not only in emerging markets and third world countries, but in first world countries. We don't have appropriate stock of housing that's affordable. Energy is not equitably dispersed among people of different races and different socioeconomic backgrounds. They bear the brunt of the higher cost of electricity, and pass-throughs for their home. So I think all of those things can be democratized, and there are systems and best practices that we can roll up into an international standards body around smart cities that can be shared. And we can start that dialogue and that discourse between the United States and South Korea and create a model which then can be replicated and adapted across the world. So sustainability, global standards, security, obviously very important to build trust, the affordability and the attainable housing, addressing also seniors and elderly with healthcare. And then to make it all happen, you need the political will and the leadership, the public policy, the advocacy to really make it happen. So
Thank you.
Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Very integrated, also comprehensive, and as a discussion to embrace all of our discussion. Well, I'd like to add three also point of mine, to integrate, summarize, or conclude our panel discussion. Well, thank you, Tony, and Professor Jung Hyuk, and Frank, and Professor Kang, and Professor Kim Yong-hwan for being in this discussion panel. From your precious idea, what I found that smart citizens probably expecting the leaders with very collective and democratic leadership, which require a lot of partnership and also embracive thinking. At the same time, those leadership will be exercised as a team. So economists will be working on the funding and financing good running model, right? And also the engineers will be working on the security with the finance of the either Bitcoin or blockchain, where you can actually motivate the economy to revamp or innovation in this field. At the same time, the policymaker will still need to do very strong leadership to have a diverse the customer or the citizens to be involved in the smart citizenship. So I think that the forum we are creating, that is probably, I think, even though it is, in some country very early stage, but still we are expecting very collective and democratic leadership in a way that, the citizens' idea can be practiced through the data and other things. That secondly, that all the field that you mentioned are in common as a human race everyone facing, which is also summarized in UN SDG. sustainable housing, right? And, and also the health issues and security issues and data and education issues, all the problems which are already defined. That's why in our forum, we say, Smart City 2030 achievement. So we really want our forum to, work on next 10 years to be one of the forum community which are probably dealing with all the UN SDG values through our Renaissance, movement and also devotion to build our smart city better. Finally, giving us a new solution. So we are all in common to, have these either UN or our, global citizen or nations are facing together. And finally, I'd like to emphasize again, the leadership, both leadership and the citizenship are expecting new trust, and also those trust and ownership or identity will be built by education and learning. I don't mean the education and learning by only the traditional degree, but there should be a certain environment, or like this forum or community or living lab, where everyone can have access to have this new environment. Well, on the way of coming to this forum with Professor Chu Young-sop, distinguished professor of Smart City at SNU, we had the lunch and we have a discussion, and then why don't we have this expo over the weekend, where we can have citizens and families coming together and listen to what's going on. Is our still expo or forum on only professional degree? Or can it be available for the citizens? Can it be available for the universal? I think this is the time that our citizens are smart enough to get involved in any of our discussion. This is not only the area of the professionalism. This is the area of general value. But, because the leadership can be strengthened and our citizens can be strengthened, this kind of area. Simply moving over, having these one available, not only online but also, having these real-time events over the weekend, and family and the citizen, normal people would be able to. I think probably what I propose to, the expo and our forum, we hope these things to be available for all the general community of the cities, so that our professionalism can be practiced. Before Frank mentioned pragmatic, and also Tony mentioned the pragmatic, so that we can involve all the citizens and citizenship. Well, I think we are already past the time around. First of all, I really thank Frank and Tony, you joining here in very early morning of the United States, and overnight discussion. I greatly appreciate that. Hope we can meet in person in next year and being together, and hope also you feel the great sense of the leadership and also together with us and showing us, and at the same time also with the Korean smart citizenship. Thank you, and greatly appreciate everyone. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for a thought-provoking panel discussion. Now, to wrap up Global Smart City Leadership Forum 2021, Professor Chun-seok Hwang will deliver closing remarks. Please give a warm welcome to Professor Chun-seok Hwang.
Well, thank you all the forum participants and also all the panelists and also interviewer and interviewee in Korea and also in the United States. Well, I'm very happy that we have this forum where we really can talk about what is the real value of the city and also citizenship and also leadership finally in those cities to be maybe led by these leaders as a community. Certainly, the community is a form of living where working and being together for human beings. And in such community, we believe both some level of mature identity, what we so-called citizenship in the aspect of cities, and at the same time matured level of probably directorship, which is we call leadership. And from our forum discussion, I found that such smart citizenship are not also separable from the smart leadership. We are in the very blooming stage of the smart city development, and there's a great need of such leadership and citizenship, the citizenship. I'd like to probably share my understanding how such citizenships could be strengthened or getting in be smarter, so that we can be so-called smart citizenship with strong, smart leadership. First thing is I'd like to say about the data. Well, I think smart city or smart community, what we are expecting is we will utilize more data, but we are expecting those smart leaders will give more environment where the data ownership and data democracy and data responsibility given to the citizens. At the same time, also citizens will have not only the ownership and right, but also responsibility for the data they are having and they are sharing, they are generating. So, but anyway, a leader would be able to give such kind of manageable capability to all the citizens, so that the data itself are not belong to certain part of the community or certain part of the government, but more. We already have done many of those things in e-government, like open data, but these need to be strengthened further, and hope we have a strong smart data democracy through smart leadership with smart citizenship. Certainly, we hope to promise our leaders, to promise to all the citizens that they will give our data ownership and good responsibility to the citizens. I think that's one thing. The second one is I still think infrastructure matters. And most infrastructure need to be available for access, and that infrastructure should be another base for the citizens. So infrastructure, what we are talking about is not only the network, but also mobility and also data platform and also security. So new form of the intelligent and smart infrastructure should be accessible, and there are the leaders, not only the political leaders, business leaders, and academic leaders, who need to work these things together to make these more infrastructure to be developed for the citizen. Then citizen will probably call those leaders to be the leader, because leader will give what the citizens need. So definitely smart citizenship or citizen will expect or will enjoy their smart city with more accessibility to the infrastructure and new form of infrastructure. Thirdly, I'd like to say intelligence. Intelligence on environment, intelligence on social, intelligence on governance. Such kind of intelligence capability need to be given to the citizens from the leaders. So not only the leaders' idea and thinking, and also, but these need to be to the more general democratic and the people, and also the citizen. This is what we call ideology. If general public are probably more familiar with the ideas and intelligence, such idea and intelligence are so-called ideology. Ideology is not a such thing that if we are not bounded on it, and then we develop and be open to the new ideology. Certainly smart citizenship are expecting new ideology, new intelligence, but it is bloomed by those citizens. And hope our leaders work together with the citizens so that we can have a more matured intelligence of environmental, social, and governance, and with the smart ideology. Certainly, in the beginning of this forum, Professor Martin Wise also stressed that smart city development will, definitely along with the technological development around the city. What it means is our life, our very relevant part of our life and citizens are technology related. In such way, the technology resources to be more available for the city and also citizens, and definitely the smart leadership should be able to be ready to give such empowerment to the new citizens where they promise to have a new smart city. And this could be done by the academia or the university or hospital and others. But definitely who are in charge of such technology should be probably for not only business developer, but for the citizenship. Finally, I'd like to stress the importance of job and work. And well, I think what we are expecting from the smart city is actually the new job or new work and new way of living through creative value. And then probably smart citizenship will be working in the smart city with more smart sector related things. We may actually have to think about our current job to be transformed to the smart job, so that our new citizens who are living and running our economic development in such cities, and to have such kind of smart job. And as an architect or as a manager, as a responsible leader of the society, always also everyone should think about how we create a new job. One of the ways of creating a job is actually entrepreneurship. I hope with the leadership would probably promote and encourage the citizen with the most entrepreneurship and small, medium, and also the new innovation, so that everyone can have more of ownership and also working responsibility at the same time, also their value system to be actualized through their job. And we probably need to think about what job we are expecting as a smart citizenship. I believe these data, infrastructure, intelligence, and technology, and finally the job, are also fundamental issues of the citizens and cities, but I hope we make those things smarter with the smart, the value of the smart citizenship. At the same time, hope many of our education programs, such as BK21, Smart City Global Convergence, and many of other professional education programs in World Bank and also international organization, and many of the professional programs in the United States, also ODA and capacity building program for the developing countries need to be strengthened. And this is, I believe, and we preach, this is one of the very important ways we need to cooperate together. I hope we focus on these main areas we agreed on today, and next year, in a year, we come back here to share our accomplishment and achievement for such more value of the smartness. I hope all of you who are in here to be a major contributor and major owner of such ownership next year. I really thank you all being with us today in this Smart City, Global Smart City Forum. Hope we will see you again in next year. I thank you, and I hope you have a great evening. Thank you very much.
Please give a big round of applause, Professor Chun-Seok Hwang. I appreciate your meaningful and motivational remarks. With that, we'll wrap up Global Smart City Leadership Forum 2021 at World Smart City Expo. On behalf of Global R&D Center and BK21 HRD program of Smart City Global Convergence at Seoul National University and the Strategic Infrastructure Performance Institute, I'd like to once again express our all appreciation to all of the speakers, moderators, interviewees, panelists, and of course, our audiences around the world for being with us at this forum. We hope that GSCL 2021 provided you with profound insights on sustainable smart city development based on transformational vision and practical measures in terms of global leadership. Thank you very much and have a great day.